Institute of Directors, and today is our event. And we are joined today by Vernon Everitt and Mark Thomas from Transport for Greater Manchester. Thank you both very much for joining us. And today is a great opportunity to understand Transport for Greater Manchester's plans for the region, and for us, the users, to give direct feedback on how we as personal and business users are impacted. And that's very much at the heart of today's event. So to start with a little bit of housekeeping, we've got a running order. Vernon is going to speak to us for about 20 minutes. Then I think Mark is going to speak for about 15 minutes, and we're then going to move into a question and answer session. If you've got questions, please do put them in the chat so that we don't miss them, because it's so easy to forget what we want to talk about. If you put the questions in the chat, when we get to the Q&A point, we'll pick up on those, and there will also be an opportunity to unmute. Yusuf will be watching for that. And if you would like to unmute, if you raise your virtual Teams hand, Yusuf will be watching for this. So I will start with a quick introduction for Vernon and Mark. So Vernon has been Transport Commissioner for Greater Manchester Transport since April of 22. His remit is to help the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, and the leaders of the 10 Greater Manchester districts deliver the B network. You may or may not know that the B network is the city region's plan for a fully integrated and sustainable transport network, bringing together buses, trams, active travel. I'm going to say I'm not sure what that is, but I'm sure you're going to tell us about that, and eventually trains. Vernon was previously a managing director at Transport for London, where he held responsibility for customer communication, technology, data, and city planning strategies, as well as delivery. And this included a period of leading London Underground. I'll just say a quick word about Mark. He's been strategic lead for business engagement at Transport for Greater Manchester since July 23. His remit is to build a strong relationship between Transport for Greater Manchester and businesses in Greater Manchester to ensure that business is at the heart of developing and delivering the B network. So that gives us some context. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to you, Vernon, to take us into your presentation.
Thank you very much, Debbie, and Mark and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your members today. So thank you very much for the opportunity. So why don't we just pile in? I've got some slides which I will just talk at. There's not much text or anything like that, but it will remind me of the thread of the story that we want to tell you today. And as Debbie says, I think it's no understatement to say that this region is on the cusp of absolute transformation in its public transport and active travel network. And active travel is basically walking, wheeling, cycling, and you know, all of those things, and I'll talk about them in a little bit more detail. But you can see here actually 5 of the first zero emission buses that are being produced for us in Scotland by Alexander Dennis, which is it is the firing gun, the start of the firing gun, if you like, for bus franchising in this region. And from September 2023, all this talk about the B network will become a practical reality. So if I just take a step back for a moment, as Debbie said, the B network is the name that we're giving the integrated public transport and active travel network in Greater Manchester. Those of you familiar with London will understand all of that from Transport for London, which integrates the underground with some heavy rail, with the buses and so on. And it will, as Debbie said, integrate Metrolink, which is already operated, of course, by the Mayor and the 10 district authorities. The profit and loss, if you like, of Metrolink is already on the books of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. And from September, the bus network start rolling through in a similar sort of way. I'll talk about the rollout of that in just a second. But what we know is if you integrate and make it easier for people to use public transport, more people will use us. And that's really important, I think, for businesses, and it's really important for the sustainability of the Greater Manchester City region. The Greater Manchester City region is growing faster than most other, in fact, faster than pretty much any other metropolitan part of the United Kingdom. And those extra people that are coming to live and work in the region need to be moved around in a more sustainable way. Well over 60% of the journeys that are conducted at the moment in Greater Manchester are by car. It's not an anti-car statement, it's just a statement of fact, with 40% of people then using public transport and active travel, and the biggest mode of that is walking. So if you looked at that in the context of London, those figures would be flipped the other way around. 40% of people drive, 60% of people use public transport and active travel. So the B network is designed to engineer that mode shift for unnecessary car journeys from the car to those more sustainable modes. Now, that also is not just about the livery, although this yellow livery will be the thing that connects up all of those services, and it will be a sign of high quality customer experience and reliability of service. It's about integrating also the fares, the ticketing, and the information provision, which is just as important actually as running a reliable, safe and reliable day-to-day operational service. So alongside bringing the modes together, we're also bringing the fares and ticketing together. So again, if you're familiar with London, you know that there's a daily cap for all travel in London. You can just use your contactless payment, tap, tap, tap away, and you will never pay more than that tap. And that's been at that cap. And that's been really important in the success of London, because people have confidence that they will never pay more than a certain amount. I mean, frankly, outside London, the array of fares and different permutations that you can have even on single modes of transport is actually quite bewildering for people who might otherwise choose to use public transport. So it's bringing together all of that and integrating the fares, ticketing, and information to reduce the barriers for people using us. Now, it's not an end in itself, of course. Transport is not an end in itself. This is all designed to help generate more jobs, more business opportunities, more homes, and more social inclusion across the Greater Manchester region, and to help our plans to decarbonise not only the transport fleet, but I think the biggest contribution we can actually make to decarbonisation is to engineer that mode shift in short order to help us deliver a much more sustainable city region. If I could go on to the next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. So here's a map of Greater Manchester, which seeks to illustrate some of what I've just said and put a timeline on it. So the yellow here is Metrolink. So 99 stops, one of the biggest, well, the biggest tram network in the UK and one of the biggest in Europe. So as I mentioned, that's already operated by the Mayor and by the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. And bus franchising adds to that. So I've already mentioned in September 23, in Wigan, Bolton and parts of Bury and Salford, we will have bus franchising for the first time. So in 1986, other than in London, the whole bus market was deregulated and run commercially. Now the government has now given combined authorities the option to bring that back in-house, and the Mayor and the leaders in Greater Manchester have decided to do that. And the biggest benefit of bringing it in-house and doing it alongside the London, in the same way as the London model, is that we, for the first time, will be able to plan the bus network in concert with the operations of all the other modes of transport, including Metrolink. So we will, for the first time, be able to take a strategic view of which are the routes that we need to enhance, and really just for the first time take both a bottom-up and a top-down look at the way in which the bus service operates. So that happens in 3 tranches. So September 23, I just mentioned, and if you go around the clock face clockwise, as it were, of Greater Manchester, in March 2024, it will be Rochdale, Oldham, and around Tameside, and then South Manchester will be brought within the franchise operations by January 2025. So in January 2025, Metrolink and the bus network will be fully integrated. You'll be able to have tap and go ticketing. That will happen in January 25, but we will, in the interim, start to simplify the product range and market the product range of the fares and the ticketing in a way which simplifies the current world. But we will have fully integrated fares and ticketing by January 2025. Next slide, please, Mark. Mm-hmm. But we won't stop there. We will move on from the integration of buses and Metrolink to then start to integrate certain of the suburban rail services that serve Greater Manchester. And they are on this graph here. There are 6 of them. They've been chosen because they are key commuter corridors, and it would make eminent sense to integrate them as well within our fares, ticketing and information systems. So as part of the Trailblazer deal, which government has done with Greater Manchester and a similar deal done with West Midlands, they have committed to helping us achieve rail integration. And this will come after the integration of Metrolink and buses. So we're looking at the latter part of this decade to get it all done. But what we will do in the meantime is run some pilot schemes whereby the fares and ticketing will be integrated between train, Metrolink and bus. And they will sort of be a proof of concept, if you like, to demonstrate that that can be revenue generative. Because, of course, what we really need to do in engendering that mode shift is to drive up public transport revenues, drive down the cost of operating the system, and then reinvest the profit in further improvements in public transport and active travel. Next slide, please, Mark. So on active travel, there is a huge agenda here led by Dame Sarah Story, who is my colleague at the Combined Authority and is the Active Travel Commissioner of Greater Manchester. And many of you will know Dame Sarah as Britain's most successful Paralympian. So Sarah and I work in very closely to make sure that the public transport agenda and plan is joined up with the active travel agenda and plan, because when you leave your house first thing in the morning, what do you normally do? Or you walk to the bus stop, or you walk to the station, or you walk to the Metrolink stop, or you cycle. And you know, the whole fabric of active travel, walking, cycling, wheeling, has to be planned and programmed in and woven in to the overall transport plan. So the plans here are enormous. There are plans for 152 kilometres of active travel segregated pathway. 44 kilometres of that has been delivered. 108 is funded and in the course of being delivered, with a further 80 kilometres after that, subject to us landing some more funding with government. I'll talk to that and talk about money in a minute. The cycle hire scheme, and you've got a partial photograph here of one of the bike hire schemes. There will in short order be 1,500 of these. 1 million kilometres have been cycled on the cycle hire scheme now, and there are 60,000 active members of the programme. But there's much more. There's a whole capital programme to deliver more segregated cycle lanes and walking paths, and also bus priority lanes, because it's one thing to have lots more buses and better planned buses, but they also need to move around the city region efficiently if people are going to use them. Thanks, Mark. Next one. So that's the plan, and we're well on with the delivery of it. There are, of course, and this is always the case with transport, there are always issues, big strategic issues, which need to be sorted out. First of all, the money. So we are funded to deliver the plans that I've just described, both from a capital and revenue perspective. But we do feel, and this is where businesses could help us enormously, and I know it's a conversation that Mark and I would like to sort of have outside this this meeting, really, Debbie, about how you can help us to make the case to government that steady and sustained capital and revenue funding is essential, particularly in the period that we are making this transition into a more integrated network. At the moment, it's been stop-go, it's been affected by COVID, and we need a steady and sustained and stable funding environment, which places obligations on local fundraising, and the Mayor's already put up the transport precept that he levies on the districts to help pay for all of this. And there are a number of other local contributions that are being funding contributions that are being made. But we do need, I think, a settled position, particularly with the next government being a year, 15 months away, whatever, to make sure that we can follow all of this through in the most effective way. So we'll talk to you separately about that if we can. HS2, well, HS2 is one of the mega projects that's going to affect Greater Manchester over the course of the next couple of decades. HS2 on its own is a 100-year project, or a project for the next 100 years, more accurately. And that's why we're expending so much time in the petitioning phase as the bill goes through Parliament for HS2, to emphasise that what we really need is an underground station at Manchester Piccadilly, which will enable more throughput, because at the moment the plan is that all the HS2 trains come into Manchester Piccadilly and stop there and have to go back out the other way. Our contention is that is inefficient, that we'll be able to run more and more reliable service if it was an underground station that ran through Greater Manchester, and it would also enable us to integrate Northern Powerhouse rail proposals and optimise the current scheme that's going on at the moment called the Trans-Pennine Route Upgrade, which is improving infrastructure between Manchester and Leeds. So there's a whole, and we could talk about this for hours actually, there's a whole strategic rail infrastructure programme which needs to be brought together. And again, we've done a lot of work with businesses both in London and across the country to help make that case. And the leader of Manchester City Council, Bev Craig, was in Parliament this week at the Select Committee, and I walked round with the Select Committee the week before, just to demonstrate to them why an underground station makes compelling sense for the region and the whole of the north. Decarbonisation and net zero, I've touched on that a bit in my earlier remarks, but we will decarbonise the transport fleet, and those buses that you saw before are zero emission, and we have a programme to get to Euro 6 for the rest of our vehicles in short order, but that will be a continuous programme of decarbonisation. But I really think that mode shift is going to be the thing that really delivers the biggest bang for our buck. Now, I'm not going to talk about them now because I'm about to hand over to Mark to update you on clean air. But the other things I will just put on your radars, if I may. Congestion, road congestion. While we've seen strong recovery actually in public transport, we've seen car journeys now above pre-pandemic levels. And it just shows what a job of work we've got to do to persuade people for the journeys that they could make by public transport, active travel, to use them. So managing congestion and being joined up across the 10 districts of Greater Manchester in terms of management of roadworks and all of that is absolutely vital, and that's also part of our B network plan. Customer growth strategy, we will market what we are doing very strongly, including looking at different products which might attract more workers, for example, your employees. We have a marketing program called Get On Board, which we will adapt over time to promote all of this. I've mentioned fares and ticketing. And the final thing I mentioned before, I just hand over to Mark, crime and antisocial behaviour. Not only do we need to run a safe and reliable network, which is also affordable, and of course we intervened big time last September to reduce bus fares from £4 single to £2 and £5 all day. That's really important. We're going to get people to use public transport. It's got to be affordable. So a safe and reliable service day in, day out, affordable, and a good customer experience. Those buses have 2 spaces for wheelchair users. They have induction loops. They have state-of-the-art audio visual. It's going to be a very high quality experience. But alongside all of that, people need to be safe and feel safe on public transport and active travel. And I'm determined that we do that. We work very closely with Greater Manchester Police on this and something called the Travel Safe Partnership, which brings together lots of agencies and outreach agencies to reach people to try and help explain why being a good user of public transport helps the region. So I just wanted to leave you with that thought as well, that crime and antisocial behaviour is also high on our agenda, and introducing later services at night to help service the nighttime economy. Okay, I will stop there, and I'll now hand over to my colleague, Mark Thomas, who's the strategic lead for business engagement at Transport for Greater Manchester. Mark.
Thank you very much, Vernon, and thank you, Debbie, and the IoD team for inviting us along today. I hope it's been helpful so far, and I can add some information to what Vernon's given as regards the vision, to some of the practical steps we're taking to try and engage businesses more as we develop what Vernon set out, the B network. But the final point on this slide at the moment that Vernon alluded to was clean air. We just wanted to recognise that this has been an issue that's been brought up by many businesses previously, and so just wanted to touch upon it as something that's kind of strategically important for the region. Vernon mentioned congestion, which is a great contributor to air quality in the city region. So the B network tackling congestion, taking it off the road will help. But also there is a clean air plan put forward by Greater Manchester, which is for a non-charging zone that we're kind of in discussions with government with at the present time, and hopefully we'll have an update in fairly soon on the next steps for clean air in Greater Manchester. So some of the practical things that we're doing at Transport for Greater Manchester to ensure businesses can be part of the B network as it grows and develops, but also to influence it. Tell us kind of what your thoughts are about it, help us to shape it in the best way that's as responsive to business needs as possible. But also, in addition to that, to encourage more people to use the B network, as Vernon has set out. It's a virtuous cycle. One of the first things we wanted to do was to collect all the information that is relevant to a business to try and use public transport and active travel a bit more into one place. So I've put a link in the chat to this at the top of the chat, but it's essentially our business portal. So a kind of one-stop shop window for everything that can support a business who wants to find out more about what to do with regards to public transport and active travel in Greater Manchester. And it covers things like ticketing offers. So there are offers available if you kind of bulk buy Metrolink tram tickets, for example, and some of those are bespoke. There's information on there about that. There's information on if you want to encourage your workforce to take up more sustainable ways to travel, how to go about that, and there's some kind of template things that you can use as a business to take the load off on there as well. There's a bit of an explainer video from a business owner kind of setting out the stall as to why we really want to encourage more businesses to take up public transport and active travel in Greater Manchester. There's a whole host of information collected on that portal. So I'd really recommend checking that out as a first step if you're interested. And again, in the chat is my email if there's anything that isn't covered on that portal. And one thing when I kind of took up the position at Transport for Greater Manchester, I was really kind of set upon gathering some improved data to help us to use the views of business to inform what happens next with the B network. And this is a long-term process, so we want to do this kind of year in, year out, and track the views of businesses in Greater Manchester to help us take really informed decisions as regards to the B network and how it develops. So the link is there on that slide, and I'd really encourage colleagues on this call to fill that out and let us know your thoughts. It takes about 5 minutes. It's quite quick, but it will be really useful to us as we try and grow the B network. And then finally, there's another way that we'd like to engage businesses in a more kind of concerted way as we kind of mature as a business ourselves, is something that we're very familiar with at Transport for Greater Manchester, which is acronyms. And the acronym on the slide there stands for the Business Transport Advisory Council. So in order for us to have a real world sounding board of businesses of every shape, size, location, makeup, sector in Greater Manchester, we're establishing an advisory board called the Business Transport Advisory Council. We're inviting expressions of interest as we speak. I think I've seen on the chat that someone's already applied, so that's really encouraging, and I'd really encourage other colleagues on the call to have a think about it. It's your opportunity to engage strategically with us regularly throughout the year, and Vernon, who has kind of painted the vision of the B network, is the co-chair of the advisory council. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for businesses and for us to have an honest dialogue about how the B network grows and develops, and we really value your input into that. So there are a few kind of practical steps that we're trying to take to better engage with businesses in the city region, and we're kind of really keen to extend that and to get your views. How can we keep improving? Please do keep in touch with us, and if Debbie's keen, we'd be happy to kind of come back and do this session again at a future date to check in on the development of the B network and also how these things are progressing. But that's it from myself and from Vernon in terms of the presentation. Hope it's been helpful. Thanks ever so much for joining the call. And then Debbie, shall I hand over to you? I think we've got if
Yes.
people have questions. Yeah.
Am
lovely.
I unmuted? Can you hear
Yep.
me? Yeah.
Can you hear you?
We've got quite a number of questions actually in the chat already. You picked up on the fact that Liz has indicated they've already applied to be part of the business advisory group. So she's put hoping to hear back on that and work with your team in the future. Could you talk us through the timing on that, when people, just takes a little bit on the process of that so that people understand what they can expect?
Sure, thank you, Debbie. And Liz, thanks so much for applying. So I suppose, firstly, the expressions of interest application process is open at the moment. It closes on Monday the 19th, but recognising that for lots of people on the call, that is probably quite short notice. So I'm sure that we can extend that a wee bit if you're really interested and are just finding out about it now. And so we expect to then look at the applications and do a sift and make decisions next month. So probably towards the end of July is when we'll start to kind of get back in touch, if that's helpful, and speak to those who've applied. And then we're looking to have the first meeting of the actual Business Transport Advisory Council, the colleagues, in late September. But that's the kind of timeline at the moment. I hope that's helpful, Liz.
Yeah, remember us, we're MP when you are sifting through those applications.
I cannot promise any bias, but absolutely I will.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Cheers, thank you.
The next, we've got a few practical questions, and I can see Yusuf's responded already to those. Then we've got Stephen Hughes, and he says, as a director who has mobility issues and a mobility scooter user, I was pleased to hear that the buses will have 2 wheelchair places, but scooters are of different dimensions. So 2 questions, please. Firstly, how will you define the size of scooter that can be used on the buses and communicate this? So if we stick with that question first, who will take that?
Well, Debbie, as I just put in, thank you for the question, Stephen. And I'm really pleased you raised it, because I didn't mention accessibility in any great depth, did I? But that's being designed into all elements of the B network, including making bus stops accessible, which sometimes strikes people as a bit counterintuitive. They say, well, it's a bus stop, it's on the street, it must be accessible. Well, as we all know, that's not always the case. So on your specific questions, the spaces for wheelchair users are very large and should be able to accommodate the largest scooters. But let me get back to you on the precise dimensions, because I don't have that off the top of my head. So Mark and I will go and get the precise dimensions.
Stephen, perhaps you feel comfortable putting some contact information? I don't know whether you've put that in. No. So for that point, perhaps you could put some contact information in the chat. You can choose just the speakers, I think, as an option, and then Vernon and Mark can get back to you specifically on that.
Yeah.
And
on the on Stephen's second question, we will make sure that there is clear signage about who has access to that these spaces are for wheelchair users. I had a lot of experience of this in London, and because this is where buggies and wheelchair users are sort of contending for limited space, and those spaces are for wheelchair users. So buggies need to be folded, and the preference is given to wheelchair users. So we will make sure that there is clear signage, that we make sure that in all of our public communications that we explain what those spaces are actually for. And what, in my experience in London, when we made sure that we communicated this effectively, we've seen the instances of conflict between buggies and buggy users and wheelchair users to sort of diminish. So hopefully we'll be able to do it that way, Stephen.
Is it worth Vernon me kind of just highlighting as well the role of a disability design reference group? So Stephen, just in case you might not be aware, and hopefully to reassure to an extent, that when we were kind of procuring the buses and things for the B network, and as it will be in future, all the design and everything goes through what's called a disability design reference group, which is something that Transport for Greater Manchester run, and engages a whole range of disability groups across the city region in order to essentially sense check everything that's being procured to make sure that it meets the kind of criteria that they would like to see. And that is why, kind of as Vernon touched upon, the specification for these buses will be so high, which is something you might kind of not see at the moment, but will in future.
And just to build on that, what we'll do, the new buses will all be of the highest spec from day one, and we'll go through a program of making sure that the existing fleets are upgraded over time. So it won't all happen from day one. There'll be a progressive program of upgrading the buses that were already out there, but all of the new ones will be a spec, and we'll get to the whole fleet as rapidly as we can.
Stephen, hopefully that answers your question on that. Just whizzing through, next question is from Greg. Is tram train still in the TFGM pipeline for the Warrington Central and Walkden train lines?
Tram train is in the pipeline alongside many other things. And this sort of goes back a little bit to the point I was raising about capital funding, because there's a pipeline but no funding currently. So it's there. There are a number of other schemes that are in the pipeline as well, including extensions to Metrolink. So I think one of the things that I'd like to do over the course of the next year is really get to a prioritised list of things that we're going to and move along. We've got the money to move along the business cases, the preparation of the business cases for all of these things. And I think once we've reached that stage, we've got some choices to make.
Would it be fair to say, on the basis of that, that people who feel strongly about that particular network there, or the tram train there, the more vocal they are and the more that's communicated to you, the more it helps you understand and when you're doing your priorities?
Completely. Look, we want to do this. We want to do this transparently. We want to do everything transparently, actually, because this whole enterprise that I've just described only works if we're transparent about it, and it in the jargon, it's co-created by the people who are going to be the beneficiaries of it, and that applies, yes, Debbie, to capital programs. And there are lots of competing bids for different types of capital. I'm not trying to put a downer on everything, incidentally. I'm just trying to be realistic that we need it to work through the business cases for all of these things, including tram train, and then decide which ones we're going to pitch for funding for.
Yeah. So the better the business case, that helps that particular community and you when you're evaluating things.
Completely.
Just looking down, I can see Stephen's put his details in. That's great. Somebody's requesting email contact information for Vernon.
I'll put mine in there.
Okay. Then we've got a question from Claire. Could we have some proactive surveys or manifesto, perhaps, to show that local business supports the B network changes to reduce road danger, increased public transport and walking and cycling? Can business bodies take a lead on this? I don't think local business voice is loud enough and change is needed.
Absolutely. Thank you, Debbie. I've put in the chat there that it's something where we are looking at, and to kind of essentially enable a louder business voice, and to put business on the front foot with issues like this, kind of working in tandem with Transport for Greater Manchester. So I'd be really keen to talk to Claire a bit more about that, and particularly looking at road danger. That is something that Dame Sarah Story is really high on her agenda, and has something called Vision Zero. I don't know whether you would want to talk about that, Vernon, a wee bit more, just on that issue in particular.
Well, as Claire knows, because I bumped into her at the launch event, we've launched a piece of work. Dame Sarah Story has launched a piece of work which is looking at what a Vision Zero system might look like for Greater Manchester. And Vision Zero is work to eradicate all death and serious injury on the roads. Adopted by Transport for London, it was adopted by Scandinavian countries in the late 90s, and it's been proven to look at a whole. If you look at the road network, for example, as a whole system, it's been proven to significantly reduce death and serious injury. So I like Claire's idea of a business manifesto, and that's something which hopefully Mark, we could follow up with Debbie on, because I think not only do we need to lobby government for the funding from both a capital and a revenue perspective, we also need to explain what we're going to spend it on and why that makes sense. And if we have the voice of business behind us saying these changes enable us to, broaden the pool of people from whom we can recruit. So the fares reduction is a good example. I mean, I was astonished when I came from London, where the bus fare even now is only £1.75, to discover that a single bus journey was £4. So if you were in Oldham and there was a job at the airport, it would cost you £8 to get there and back in a day on the. I mean, there were other products, but you get the point. I mean, it's really expensive. And that would limit the ability of Manchester Airports Group to recruit people from the GM region, because people won't be prepared to spend a colossal amount of their income on travel. So I think, again, it goes back to my point about transport not being an end in itself. It's an enabler, and for businesses, what we're hoping is that this enables you to attract a broader pool of talent. And goodness knows, we know this at the Combined Authority and at TFGM, the war for talent is intense. So I love that. I love Claire's idea.
I think Claire's confirmed that she will get in touch, and the contact information there is available.
Thank you.
Just moving on to the next one. Hopefully I'm pronouncing this correctly. I think it's Patrick Pfaff. What are the plans for transport improvement for Middleton? Any chance for Metrolink extension or express buses to improve connectivity?
On the list, Patrick. I mean, the Middleton extension for the Metrolink is there, and the mayor's spoken about this, I think, in the past. So, that's on the agenda, and of course, Middleton will benefit from the changes in bus franchising as well, and a more coherent and integrated network. And everybody across Greater Manchester actually stands to benefit from the revised fares structure, simplified fare structure. So there's a lot going on in Middleton. I don't know, Mark, whether we're able to give a little bit more of a detailed breakdown for Patrick outside this meeting, but
yeah, certainly. Yeah, Patrick, really happy to kind of follow up on that about kind of a bit more detail on stuff that's confirmed and also kind of mentioned for Middleton. No problem. Yeah.
So Patrick, we've got the contact information there in the chat if you want to touch base afterwards and pick up with that. And I think we're back again to the whole inputting the information, putting your business case together.
Yeah.
So moving on down, Robert Eves. How will the B network integrate with interurban services, bus rail and tickets to towns around the outside of the GM boundary?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Robert. And the map that I showed earlier, which showed the rail services, most of those rail services cross boundary. So we're already working with the Greater British Railways transition team. As you all probably know, there's change afoot in terms of the way in which national rail services are run, and Great British Railways is being established. And the pilot that I mentioned on fares and ticketing is actually being done in conjunction with them as a proof of concept outside London. So we will be looking at how you integrate, particularly the fares, in that sort of way. We've done it in London. So there are agreements with the train operating companies and the DfT about how much is charged for those cross-boundary services. So it's all absolutely doable. Same thing with the buses, and there are, as you rightly observed, there are a number of buses that come from outside the GM area, and a number of those actually have adopted the same fare structures as Greater Manchester already. But I think what the B network will do, and certainly by January 25, when all the buses have been franchised, it will make this cross-boundary issue much easier to solve. Because at the moment, it's almost too big a thing to solve all at once. But as we progressively get our house in order within Greater Manchester, I think that will enable us to have discussions with operators of services that cross boundaries to deal and remove some of the inconsistencies that there might be in fare structures. We do already talk to a number of them though, so it's not as if we're not. I just think that in turn, I mean, my ultimate aim, of course, is that, you know, we're working on this in Greater Manchester. The Liverpool City region are working on their plan for their centre. Same with West Yorkshire and so on. You know, ultimately, we want this to be a frictionless set of journeys across those jurisdictions, and up from London, of course. And I don't mean pay as you go necessarily, but just looking at every step to make sure that we can remove the friction that there is in moving from one region of the country to another. I really think these city region plans that are being implemented everywhere will help us connect up the regions once we've connected up the islands.
Thank you for that, Vernon. We've got one last question in the chat, and then I've got one actually. So Patrick asks, is the electrical grid across Greater Manchester ready to support increased numbers of electric buses? Electric car charging infrastructure is already a problem.
Yeah, we're talking to, is it Northwest? I always get the name wrong.
Electricity Northwest. Yeah.
Electricity Northwest. I always get the words, and I get the right words in the wrong order. So yeah, we're talking to them. I mean, you're right, Patrick. I mean, one of the major challenges for getting ready for bus franchising and introducing all of those zero emission buses, and there'll be 50 in the first tranche, another 50 in the second tranche, 170 for South Manchester as well, and there will be more after that, is to make sure that we've got the depots are upgraded. We're going to do a new depot actually as well near Cornbrook to service the electric fleet, and we're working very closely with electricity providers, and I think we'll be okay. I think there's a whole different set of discussions about quite how nationally actually, as well as within GM, that we roll out better charging infrastructure for vehicles.
Thank you for that, Vernon. My question is really thinking about this point about business attracting people, retaining talent, attracting talent, and definitely transport is a part and parcel of that. And I'm wondering whether there's potential as matters go forward for any deals with employers where they can buy sort of monthly, annual, whatever tickets that will go across all of these different services, because that is undoubtedly, you know, if your employer's giving you that for free, that's a pretty compelling case to use it.
Absolutely, Debbie, completely. There is already, my colleague, Mark's colleagues at Transport Greater Manchester, there are some products already that you could sort of buy at wholesale prices. Mm-hmm. But I think they're quite limited, Mark, aren't they, to Metrolink and others. And what we're thinking about now is how do we price these things, and how can we give businesses an incentive to offer the. I mean, when I started work all those decades ago in 1980, you used to get a season ticket loan, and you know, I just love it if businesses did that. And enabled their people to buy, you know, period tickets. I mean, a lot of people work more flexibly, of course, don't they now, Debbie? And therefore we need to cater for people that are sort of, you know, more and more people are going back into the office actually. But even pre-COVID, people were maybe working 4 days from the office, 1 day from home or whatever. So we need flexibility in the product range is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But we're definitely up for helping design products or enabling products that do what you just said. And Mark would be delighted to hear from anybody that's interested in that. And we can explain the existing product range. I think it's on the portal actually, Mark, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it's on that portal. But we really, those kind of suggestions from yourself, Debbie, and from others colleagues on the call as to what would work for your workforce in terms of a product like that, as the B network is coming forward and we're looking at those integrated tickets, so not just the tram, which only works for some locations and not all. We'd really be really keen to get as much feedback as we can so that we can introduce something that would work for businesses. So that's definitely a live conversation at the moment in Transport for Greater Manchester. We need to get something that's pitched right so it's well used and doesn't just, I suppose, sit there as a product, and it really encourages people to go and use public transport. But yeah, really would love to hear more about that, and perhaps we could test a kind of product suggestions with IoD members at some point. But yeah, conversation for another time.
And sounds like a really good one, perhaps for your council discussions as
Yes.
well, where you can get that sort of broad input. That amazingly brings us to 25 past. You always worry when you're hosting these events that you won't get any questions. So I really thank everybody who's engaged and put questions in the chat, because we want to deliver information to you, and this has been your opportunity to put questions, and you've done it, so that's been brilliant. I'm just going to finish really with a couple of points. First of all, to thank Vernon and Mark for coming and being so open and to giving information and being challenged a little bit today on some things. So thank you guys for that. Just to let you know what to expect afterwards, there will be an email coming out to all of you from the IoD. It will, I think, attach the recording, and there will be 1 or 2 bits of information in that again, contact information. I think, guys, you're going to put, Mark, are you putting together a tiny little bit of information about some of the things that you've talked about today, so that that's there in the follow-up email?
Yeah, I will do that.
That's great. I'd also just like to say that this is typical of the kind of events that the Institute of Directors does. We like to collaborate with other organisations. If you've got ideas about organisations you'd like us to talk to or information that you would like, I've put my email in the chat there. Please do contact me, because we want to deliver what you want to know about. If you're not an IoD member and you'd like to know more about it, again, there will be a little bit in the follow-up email, or you can contact me. Very happily chat to you afterwards. And I'm just going to finish by saying that I hope it's been useful, and really hope that I will see you again. There's just a couple of bits in the chat there, making sure that we've covered everything off. I think we have. That looks good. Claire's put a point about with the local IoD create a public endorsement of the B network. That will certainly be something that will be a discussion at our end. So we're a couple of minutes early, but I always think it's good to finish at least on time. And unless there's anything else, I'm going to close the meeting and just thank everybody once again for their time.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Debbie. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
okay.
Thanks, everyone.
See you all soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.